after the War of 1812. This fort structure was here. The White family had moved to it. Isaac Hill had moved on to other things. The White family lived in this fort. The area that we're in became Bond County, became an early territory. We were named for our first territorial governor. This served as the first courthouse. We have up in our current courthouse today the original court minutes that were read at Hills Fort. So it actually served as the first county seat. Many years later, as the cabins fell down and rotted down, termites were eating the log walls were carried off and used for firewood. The actual cabin from the blockhouse was taken down and moved about a quarter-mile away. It became a family home. Part of that home survived until 1970, believe it or not. We now know that. We didn't realize it at the time. There was an old log house that was down there in the area. Burnell Newman had been born in that home, and it was one of the surviving cabins from Hills Fort that stayed there in that region. Hills Fort, like I say, they moved the logs away, used some of it for firewood. One of them was used actually for a home. The site ceased to be used as a fort. It was used for a stockade where they would run cattle in here before cattle sale and so forth. The cattle would stomp the ground and pack the ground down. About 2001, we had a young lady that came to this area from SIU Edwardsville. She was writing a history research paper. And she contacted me and Dean Anthony, and she says, you know, I think I can maybe find that fort. Do you know about where it was? Dean and I had a pretty good idea down there on that field where it was. The fields down there at Cease's farm are not unlike this, just wide, flat, open field. The beans had been taken down, and it was just a flat, mowed site at that point in time. After that, we told her where we roughly thought it was. She did her research paper, and they brought some machinery down from Springfield called a magnetron. And what it was like a pitchfork, an aluminum pitchfork that you stick this thing in the ground. We would do it every 3 feet. It was meters, actually, every meter, but about 3 foot. Stick it in the ground, and it would test how tightly packed the soil is. And then at night, they would spit that image out on a computer, and it would create a digital image of how tightly packed the soil was in this region. We did this all day on a Saturday. I don't remember if you guys were here then or not, Eric, if you were down there and part of that. It was very interesting. They laid out a grid system of strings where we thought the fort was. Saturday night, they spit out their image, and there was what we found an anomaly. What we found was a 90-degree corner of shaded soil. Now, you're out in a wide open field, but for some reason, this soil's packed tighter than the rest. Sunday morning, we moved the grid a little bit west. We redid it, and Sunday night, they spit out another image. And we found on that image a rectangle out in the middle of a flat open field. There's nothing there. There's been nothing there for 200 years. We spit out a computer image that night that showed a rectangle on the ground that was 115 feet wide, 141 foot long. It had a 24-foot square cabin sitting in the center of it, a smaller cabin, 18-foot square by it, 24-foot square in the corner, which represents our blockhouse, and out in the center was a round hole. We think that was the flagpole, and a gate on one end. We'd actually found a digital image, a CAT scan of the earth of what Hills Fort looked like. It was really amazing. It may or may not be. We're fairly certain it is. An anomaly is just an unexplained occurrence. Like I say, when you're out in a flat open field and for some reason that ground is packed that much tighter in that region, we actually, after 200 years, found the site of Hills Fort. Down there at the fort, the actual site, there's a monument. Just a big rock that says Battle of Hills Fort. There's 4 tombstones representing the 4 soldiers of the War of 1812 that fell that day down there at that site. It's not on the side of the fort. That monument is about, say 2 city blocks south of where the fort was. The fort was up in the middle of the field. The monument was placed closer to the road that's down there. We do not own that site. It's actually somewhat, historic sites like this are actually protected. Even though they're not owned by the state of Illinois, it's protected. You can't just go down there with a metal detector and start looking around to see what you find. You could get in trouble for doing it. Ceases have farmed it for many, many years, as have families before them. Since we don't own the site, there's no water, there's no protection, there's no electric, we decided we'd like to build a reproduction, and the Farm Heritage Museum had come into business at that time. We were donated, this organization, the Hills Fort Society, was donated logs. These log walls that are in here came from Fort Massac State Park down on the Ohio River at Metropolis, Illinois. The state was tearing that facility down and building a more a correct type facility. These old logs had started deteriorating, and so they basically gave us 2 trailer loads of logs. And we thought, well, what are we going to do with them? We brought them here and built this cabin first. We then built the blockhouse. We've had a ton of donated labor and time. We've been collecting telephone poles for several years. Eric and the Rangers of the War of 1812 and the Sons of the Revolution have been working diligently to build these stockade walls around it. So we're actually building 115-foot by 140-foot reproduction of the site out here so we can tell the story of Hill's Fort. Our site is one of the rare few sites in the state of Illinois that we can actually pinpoint, know where it was, and have a pretty good knowledge of what was there on that site. Realistically, inside here there was probably a couple more cabins that over the 200 years, the ground has been washed away, it's been farmed all these years. There was probably more cabins that just hadn't left the impact on the soil of the main 2 cabins, the blockhouse and the stockade. So we just kind of lucked out finding what we did when we did find it. I mentioned the flagpole out here. When you come out here, we're going to go out. I'll be glad to answer some questions in a few minutes, but I did want to tell you about the flag. Make sure you glance up and take a look at it. What we are flying out here today is we are flying the Star Spangled Banner. The Star Spangled Banner is the flag of the War of 1812. It is our 15-star, 15-stripe flag. What Congress did is, the first flag, of course, was 13 stars, 13 stripes. They decided for the admission of new states, so when they admitted, I believe it was Louisiana and Kentucky had been admitted to the Union, they added 2 stars and they added 2 stripes. Well, then the next year they added a couple more states, and they realized, wait a minute, we can't keep adding stars and stripes, how are we going to do this? It took Congress about 20 years, it was 1818, before they finally standardized the United States flag. They decided it was always going to be 13 stripes, and then they would add a star for every new state added to the Union. So that's how they did that. So through the War of 1812, we actually had a 15-star, 15-stripe flag. Our fort here at Hill's Fort and Fort Clatsop, which is out in Washington State, that's where the Lewis and Clark expedition went. We and I believe Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor are the only 3 places I know of that fly the Star Spangled Banner over our forts. But that's just little historic flag stuff for you. So I thought, but whenever you look up, make sure you take a look at our Star Spangled Banner we have. By the way, Battle of Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. Francis Scott Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner. That battle happened, I believe, ours was September 9th, I think it was September 14th, 1814. The Battle of Baltimore happened just a few days after the Battle of Hill's Fort. Of course, there was no newspapers, nobody had any idea that that was taking place. But the burning of Washington took place, it would have been 199 years ago that week. And the Battle of Baltimore Harbor happened, and Francis Scott Key wrote our national anthem as he saw the flag still waving out over Fort McHenry.